talking about growing kids God's way. And in this video, I want to talk about how in the world did people who felt they were so committed to God's way to parent end up justifying writing a whole series where they removed any mention of God or any indication that they believed these were godly principles. Well, I think it comes down to their moralism, as I said, and some of their foundational premises. This is on page 16 of Growing Kids God's Way. They talk about the Bible providing everyone with the ethical standards needed for a successful life, that this is what they're basing all their moral training on. So they have this section, but what about the non-Christian? Can non-Christian parents raise a morally responsible child apart from Christ? A better question is, can an unregenerate child conform to the external demands of God's law? And they say, yes, absolutely. And they later go on to make a distinction between what they term unbiblical and non-biblical. So they define unbiblical as parenting ideas that are directly opposed to what they perceive to be biblical principles. And this would include anything that they perceive as child-centric. So in their day, it was attachment parenting. I'm sure now they would point a finger at gentle parenting and say this is unbiblical. So that should be explicitly rejected. But there are non-biblical things that they kind of lump together as things that maybe aren't found in the Bible, which is an unusual approach for biblical counseling people to take. So to sort of say there's knowledge outside of the Bible that we could glean, and if it's not in opposition to these biblical principles for moral training, we can pull from that in a kind of common sense way. What's interesting about that is that sounds fairly measured and quite balanced compared to a lot of the other stuff we've read, maybe in other resources, but they have spent hundreds of pages outlining, often in excruciating detail, principles, procedures, scripts, ways to think about parenting, ways to think about ethics, ways to communicate ethics. And they are drawing heavily on proof text to do that, such that while lip service is done to this idea that there may be some things that are non-biblical or just an opinion, the takeaway is that everything you need is in this notebook. And it's part of why there's extensive homework and tests, and insular communities doing this, and the children are doing it, and the parents are doing it, and you have coaches who are reinforcing it, because this really is presented as God's way in entirety.